Surveillance cameras at Alpine Village restaurant captured 36-year-old Lisa-Marie Naegle walking through the parking lot at 2:15 a.m. toward a black SUV. Her lover, Jackie Jerome Rogers, sat in the driver's seat waiting for her. She climbed into the passenger side. They had been having an affair for months behind her husband's back. Rogers drove towards a Jack-in-the-Box in Inglewood, parking in the back corner of the empty lot. Lisa was there to end the affair and return to her husband, completely unaware of Rogers' evil intentions or that she would never walk out of that SUV alive. Lisa was a registered nurse at Kaiser Permanente and part-time nursing instructor at West Los Angeles College in Culver City. She had appeared on the reality show Bridalplasty in 2010, where brides competed for plastic surgery procedures. Married to Derek Harriman, a vessel operations superintendent at the Port of Los Angeles since July 2011, she was actively pursuing in vitro fertilization treatment to start a family. Rogers was 34 years old, a former nursing student who had sat in Marie's classroom before passing his certification exams. He became infatuated with her during those lunch breaks when they talked in her car. Conversations that turned flirtatious, then crossed every line. The affair began in Las Vegas 6 months earlier, fueled by lies she told her husband about Rogers being her gay friend. A cover story that let her slip away to hotel rooms and late-night meetings without suspicion. Saturday night at Alpine Village restaurant in Torrance felt electric with celebration. The Bavarian-themed landmark buzzed with laughter and music. Lisa worked the room in a tight black dress, her blonde hair catching the lights as she moved from group to group, hugging friends, downing vodka sodas. She looked radiant, free. She had made her decision. Across the room, Rogers watched her every move. He stood near the bar, jaw clenched, fingers drumming against his beer bottle. Every time she laughed, his eyes narrowed. Every time she checked her phone, his throat tightened. He knew what those texts were. Derek asked when she was coming home. Lisa felt Rogers staring and avoided his gaze. Tonight was the end. She would tell him in the car, have him drop her home. Back to Derek, back to their IVF appointments and the life she had almost destroyed. She texted Rogers to meet her outside in 20 minutes. The parking lot cameras captured their exit just after 2 in the morning. Marie walked slightly ahead, heels clicking on asphalt. Rogers trailing 3 steps behind. No conversation. She opened the passenger door herself and slid inside his black SUV. He got behind the wheel. The engine started. They pulled out of the lot heading south. Rogers drove in silence toward Lenox, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Marie stared out the window, watching streetlights blur past, rehearsing the words in her head. She had practiced this conversation a dozen times. Clean break. No drama. Just tell him it was over, and ask him to take her home. When he pulled into the drive-through lane at Jack-in-the-Box just after 2:30 in the morning, she thought he was getting food to sober up. The speaker crackled. Rogers said nothing. He pulled through without ordering and drove across the street, parking in a dark corner of an empty lot where no security cameras could see inside the vehicle. The nearest streetlight was 50 feet away. Lisa-Marie turned in her seat to face him and said they needed to talk about this. About them. Rogers kept his eyes fixed straight ahead through the windshield, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. She took a breath and said she couldn't do this anymore. This thing between them had to stop. She loved Derek. She had always loved Derek. They were trying to have a baby together. The IVF appointments were starting this week, and she needed to focus on her marriage. On building a family with her husband. Rogers felt something snap inside his chest. His breathing went shallow, rapid, his vision tunneling. He asked her if she meant any of it, any of the past 6 months, the Vegas trip when they spent an entire weekend in bed, the afternoons in his car when she said being with him made her feel alive, the late nights when she called Derek and lied about working overtime just to spend another hour with Rogers. She said it was fun while it lasted, but it wasn't real. It was never meant to be permanent. She needed to go home to her husband now. His hands started shaking on the steering wheel, rage flooding through his veins like ice water. She was using him. She had been using him this entire time, playing with him like a toy she could pick up and put down whenever she felt like it. Going back to Derek like Rogers was nothing, like the past 6 months meant nothing, like he meant nothing. He told her he loved her. He had been in love with her since those first lunches in her car when she smiled at him and made him feel seen. She said she was sorry if he misunderstood. She was sorry if she led him on. But she didn't feel the same way. She never had. This was a mistake from the beginning, and now it needed to end. She reached for the door handle. Rogers twisted in his seat and grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave marks. Naegle jerked her arm back, telling him to let go, her voice rising with the first edge of real fear. He held tighter, his fingers digging into her skin. She pulled harder. He wouldn't be released. She slapped at his arm with her free hand, her nails raking across his forearm. Then he remembered the hammer. It had been sitting behind his driver's seat for nearly a month, wrapped in an old towel. A coworker at the hospital had seen it in his car 3 weeks earlier and asked why he was carrying it around. Roger said he couldn't recall why it was there, but that was a lie. He knew exactly why. Somewhere in the dark corners of his mind where obsession turned to rage, he had known this moment was inevitable. The moment she tried to abandon him. The moment she proved she never loved him at all. His right hand released her wrist and reached back between the seats, fingers finding the towel, pulling it away, gripping the wooden handle worn smooth from use. Naegle saw the movement in her peripheral vision, and her eyes went wide with sudden understanding. She screamed and lunged for the door, her fingers scrabbling for the handle. The hammer came down hard across her left temple, with a crack that echoed inside the enclosed SUV like a gunshot. Blood exploded across the dashboard in arterial spray. Lisa's scream cut short, replaced by a wet, choking gasp. She crumpled sideways against the passenger door, both hands flying to her head, fingers coming away slick and red. Her eyes rolled. Rogers pulled the hammer back and hit her again. The second blow crushed the orbital bone around her right eye socket with a sound like stepping on eggshells. She tried to fight back through the shock and pain, tried to raise her arms to protect her head, but the third strike came down on her left forearm when she blocked, shattering her wrist with enough force that bone fragments tore through skin. She screamed again, the sound gurgling now, blood filling her throat. The fourth blow split her scalp from crown to ear. The fifth caved in the back of her skull when she twisted away trying to reach the door one more time. Her body spasmed. The sixth and seventh strikes landed in the same spot at the base of her skull, splintering fragments of bone inward into brain tissue, rupturing blood vessels, destroying the medulla oblongata. The eighth blow finally stopped her twitching. The entire attack lasted 90 seconds from first strike to last. Naegle slumped motionless in the passenger seat, blood pooling in her lap and soaking into her black dress, her breathing reduced to a shallow death rattle. The windshield was painted red. Brain matter clung to the passenger side airbag. Rogers sat frozen in the driver's seat, the hammer still raised, blood dripping from the claw end onto his jeans. His shirt was splattered with arterial spray in a Jackson Pollock pattern. Then the panic set in. He had to hide this. He had to fix that. He started the engine and drove the 6 blocks to his parents' house on West 106th Street in Lenox. The neighborhood was silent at 3 in the morning. He pulled into the driveway and killed the lights. Marie was still breathing, barely. Wet gurgling sounds came from her throat. Rogers opened the passenger door and tried to lift her, but she was dead weight. He found a wheelbarrow in the garage and maneuvered her limp body into it, her head lolling to one side, blood dripping through the metal mesh bottom onto the driveway. He wheeled her to the backyard, the same yard where police had once found his starving horse in 2009. The animal cruelty case that landed him on probation and should have been a warning sign to everyone who knew him. He grabbed a shovel leaning against the back fence and started digging near the property line, where the grass gave way to bare dirt. The ground was hard, baked by months of Southern California drought. Dry clay that resisted every thrust of the blade. It took 45 minutes of steady digging to excavate a hole 3 feet deep and barely long enough for her body. His shoulders burned. Sweat soaked through his shirt despite the December chill. When he finally tossed the shovel aside and rolled her out of the wheelbarrow into the crude grave, her chest was still rising and falling, shallow breaths, barely perceptible. Her eyes fluttered beneath closed lids. She was trying to breathe through the massive head trauma, her body refusing to quit even though her brain was destroyed. Rogers stared down at her naked form, crumpled in the dirt, and realized he couldn't bury her alive. He couldn't shovel earth over her face while she was still drawing breath. Not because of mercy. Because of the sound she might make underground. Because she might claw at the dirt. Because somehow, impossibly, she might survive long enough to be heard. He picked up the hammer one more time, still slick with her blood, and brought it down twice on the left side of her skull. The sound was different this time. Wetter, softer. The bone had already fractured. These strikes finished what the others started. The shallow breathing stopped. Her chest went still. He stood in the hole beside her body and stripped off every piece of her clothing. The black dress, the underwear, the jewelry around her neck. Less evidence. He climbed out and started shoveling dirt back into the hole, covering her face first, then her torso, then her legs. When the hole was half filled, he walked to where the horse had been kept and scooped manure, dumping it over the fresh dirt, packing it down with the shovel until the ground looked relatively undisturbed. He scattered dead leaves over the obvious seams. He threw the shovel back against the fence and returned to the SUV. The interior looked like a slaughterhouse. Blood on the seats, dashboard, ceiling, brain matter on the passenger airbag. Rogers spent the next hour scrubbing with bleach, paper towels piling up in a black trash bag. He used 2 entire rolls. He smashed her phone against the driveway until the circuit board exposed. He slashed her purse with a knife and drove through Lenox, throwing pieces out the window. Her wallet, her shoes, scattered across 6 blocks. By 5 in the morning, exhausted and covered in dried blood, Rogers went home to his own apartment and fell asleep. Sunday morning, Derek woke up alone. Naegle's side of the bed was untouched. He called her phone, straight to voicemail. He texted her brother Raphael, asking if she stayed at his place. Raphael said he hadn't gone to any party. Derek's chest tightened. He called Marie's work. She wasn't there. He called her friends. No one had seen her since Alpine Village. Monday, December 19, Derek and Lisa's sister Danielle walked into LAPD Harbor Division to file a missing persons report. The officer behind the desk told them department policy required waiting 72 hours before opening an investigation. Someone missing for 36 hours wasn't technically missing yet, Derek begged. Danielle pleaded. The officer said his hands were tied. Come back Wednesday if she doesn't show up. They left the station furious and terrified. 72 hours. She could be anywhere. She could be hurt. She could be dying. They weren't waiting for bureaucracy to save her. The family launched a Facebook page called Finding Lisa-Marie Naegle. They posted her photo everywhere. They called every hospital in Los Angeles County. Derek tried activating Find My iPhone remotely, but the phone was offline, destroyed. Then Danielle had an idea. She went to a birthday party. There were witnesses. There might be cameras. Virginia Moya, a family friend, drove to Alpine Village restaurant on Monday afternoon. She found a manager named Tony dealing with cleanup from a staff Christmas party. He initially hesitated when she asked to see security footage, privacy policies, liability concerns. Virginia told him a woman was missing, and he might have the last recording of her alive. Tony unlocked the security office. They scrolled through Saturday night footage together. Virginia's heart stopped when she saw her on screen, laughing with friends near the bar, then walking through the parking lot at 2:15 a.m. Then getting into a black SUV driven by someone Virginia recognized from family gatherings. Virginia grabbed her phone and started texting screenshots to Danielle. The timestamp, the vehicle, Rogers' face through the windshield, proof that he had lied. Because Rogers had already been to the family's house. Raphael had called him Sunday asking if he knew where Naegle was, since Rogers was supposed to be her date to the party. Rogers said he got tired and left early. She stayed behind to keep celebrating. That was his story. He left her there. Now the surveillance footage proved he was lying. Virginia sent the final screenshot and wrote one sentence. She left with this person, and he's at your mother's house right now. The family had invited Rogers to Marie's mother's house Monday evening to ask questions. They set up a GoPro camera on a bookshelf, pointing at the couch before he arrived. The little red recording light blinked in the corner. Rogers sat down across from Danielle, Derek, and Raphael. His hands clasped between his knees, his voice steady. He repeated the same story. He got tired. He left her at Alpine Village. She wanted to keep partying. Danielle asked what time he left. Rogers said around 1:30. She asked if anyone saw him leave. He said he didn't know. He just went home. Derek asked if Rogers and Marie were having an affair. Rogers' face flushed. He admitted they had been intimate. He admitted he had feelings for her. But Saturday night, he left her at the party. He swore. Danielle's phone buzzed in her pocket. Virginia's text with the surveillance screenshots. She opened the images and felt her blood go cold. Rogers was sitting in his SUV at 2:15 a.m. Lisa climbed into the passenger seat. Both of them drove away together. She looked up at Rogers and asked him one more time if he left her at the party. He nodded. His leg was bouncing now. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Danielle turned her phone around and showed him the screenshot. Rogers's face was drained of color. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The room went silent except for the GoPro's nearly inaudible whir. Danielle said, "The cameras don't lie. You left with her." "Where did you take her?" Rogers stammered. He said, Okay. She got in the car, but then she got out at a gas station, Vermont and Torrance Boulevard. She used her card there. You can check. Someone used her debit card. That proves she got out. Raphael stood up and moved toward the door. Derek asked where Marie went after the gas station. Rogers said he didn't know. He drove home. She stayed at the gas station. Maybe she got a ride. Maybe she called someone. He kept changing details. His hands shook. His voice cracked. Danielle told Raphael to move his car behind Rogers' SUV in the driveway. Box him in. Don't let him leave. She called 911 and said they had a suspect in a missing person case, and he was lying about the last time he saw her. Police needed to come now. Rogers realized what was happening. He asked if he could leave. Derek said no. Rogers stood up and said he needed to use the bathroom. Raphael blocked the hallway. Rogers sat back down and put his head in his hands. The GoPro captured every second. LAPD detectives arrived within the hour and took Rogers to Harbor Division for questioning. The interrogation lasted through Monday night and into Tuesday morning. Detectives showed him the Alpine Village surveillance. They showed him witness statements. They told him cadaver dogs were ready to search his house. They told him this was his chance to tell the truth. At some point after midnight, Rogers broke. He admitted they argued in the car. He admitted he hit her with a hammer. He admitted burying her in his backyard. He would show them where. Tuesday afternoon, December 20. A Los Angeles County coroner's team descended on the house on West 106th Street. They brought shovels and evidence markers and body bags. Rogers stood in handcuffs and pointed to a spot near the back fence. Dig there, 3 feet down. They found Lisa at 4 p.m., naked and face down in the shallow grave. Her skull fractured in 8 places from the front to the back, dirt and manure packed over her body. The medical examiner later determined the cause of death was blunt force trauma. At least 10 hammer strikes total, 8 in the SUV, 2 more in the yard when Rogers realized she was still breathing. Rogers was booked into Los Angeles County Jail on 1 count of murder with a special allegation of personal use of a deadly weapon. Bail was set at $2 million. He pleaded not guilty at his arraignment in January 2017. The trial began in September 2018 at Torrance Superior Court. Deputy District Attorney Allison Ostrowski opened with the surveillance footage, projecting Naegle walking through the Alpine Village parking lot at 2 a.m, getting into Rogers' black SUV. The last time anyone except her killer saw her breathing, Ostrowski presented Virginia, who described texting screenshots to Danielle, while Rogers sat in their living room lying. The coworker testified next. She worked with both Naegle and Rogers at Kaiser Permanente, and remembered seeing a hammer wrapped in a towel behind Rogers' seat approximately 1 month before the murder. She asked why he was carrying it. Rogers said he couldn't recall. Premeditation. The hammer wasn't grabbed in rage. It had been there for weeks, waiting. The medical examiner took the stand with autopsy photographs. 8 distinct impact sites on the skull from the attack in the vehicle. Massive hemorrhaging. Bone fragments driven into brain tissue. Then 2 additional impact sites at the base of the skull, consistent with strikes delivered while the victim was prone. 10 total hammer strikes. The first 8 rendered her unable to defend herself. The final 2 were delivered to ensure death. Detectives testified about the interrogation. Rogers denied everything, then admitted she got in his car but got out at a gas station, then finally confessed after midnight and led them to the grave. They played audio recordings of Rogers describing the attack in his own voice, explaining he hit her 2 more times in the backyard because he didn't want to bury her alive. Defense attorney Jeremy Lessem put Rogers on the stand, risky but necessary. Rogers testified for 6 hours over 2 days about feeling emotionally abused by Marie. He said she called him names, mocked his appearance, sometimes slapped him during arguments. Lessem brought in a psychiatric expert who testified about Rogers' developmental disabilities, his below-average IQ, and his impaired impulse control. The defense argument was simple: crime of passion by a man with limited cognitive function who snapped under abuse. But on cross-examination, Ostrovsky destroyed that narrative. She asked about the hammer. Why was it there a month before? Rogers couldn't remember. She asked about Friday night when he sat outside Naegle's house for hours. What were you doing? Rogers said he wanted to talk. She asked about the 2 final strikes in the grave. Rogers said she was still breathing and he didn't want to bury her alive. Ostrovsky turned to the jury and pointed out that someone in uncontrollable rage doesn't carefully check if the victim is breathing, doesn't methodically deliver 2 more calculated blows, doesn't spend an hour cleaning a car with bleach. Those aren't the actions of impaired judgment. Those are the actions of a man who knew exactly what he had done. On the 24th of September 2018, after 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict on first-degree murder. The special weapon allegation was found true. Marie's mother wiped away tears. Rogers showed no emotion, no remorse, not even when the judge ordered him remanded to custody. Sentencing was delayed when Rogers fired his attorney and hired new representation, frustrating the family who had prepared victim impact statements. On the 8th of April 2019, Judge Hector M. Guzman imposed the maximum sentence allowed under California law, 26 years to life in state prison. Rogers appealed. California's 2nd District Court of Appeal upheld the conviction in August 2020, finding the evidence overwhelming. The California Supreme Court declined to hear the case in October 2020. A federal habeas corpus petition filed in 2021 was dismissed with prejudice. Jackie Jerome Rogers is currently incarcerated in California State Prison, where he will remain for at least 26 years before becoming eligible for parole. Derek Harriman has not spoken publicly since the sentencing. The surveillance cameras at Alpine Village restaurant captured Naegle's last moments of freedom. Her family's refusal to wait for bureaucracy captured her killer within 4 days. It wasn't the police who solved this murder. It was a sister, a family friend, and a GoPro recording every lie.